The nest was already cold when Wraith found it. He had been walking through the ruins for 2 hours. His boots crunched on broken dracery shell fragments, on collapsed wall panels, on the ash that covered everything like gray snow. The ceasefire had been called 14 hours ago. Command told him to sweep the old nesting ground, confirm full enemy withdrawal, and come back. Simple job. 1 hour, maybe 2. Nobody told him the nest would not be fully empty. He heard them before he saw them. A sound so small he almost walked past it, something between a scrape and a breath, coming from inside the collapsed outer wall of the largest nest structure. Wraith stopped. He turned his head. Soldiers who ignored small sounds did not stay alive long, and 7 years of war had burned that lesson into his bones. He pushed aside a sheet of fallen wall panel. Underneath, in a hollow that smelled of old warmth and dust, 3 dragon hatchlings sat pressed together in the dark. They were tiny. That was the first thing that hit him. He had fought dracery warriors twice his height, soldiers with chest plates like tank armor and wing spans that blocked out the sky. These 3 were nothing like that. The biggest one came up to his knee. They were scaled, but the scales were still soft-looking, the way young things always look before the world finishes making them hard. Their eyes caught the pale light coming through the broken wall. None of them ran. That was the second thing. They just looked at him. The biggest one sat in front, slightly ahead of the other 2. Dark scales, too small for a dracery warrior, not sickly, just lean and short in a species that prized size above everything. It studied his face the way experienced soldiers study a new situation. Quick, quiet, calculating the angles. The middle one was pale, almost gray-white, with a left wing folded oddly against its back, not tucked, just hanging wrong like it had never properly set. It said nothing, just watched. The smallest one had round gold eyes. It looked at Wraith. Then it looked at his boot. Then it waddled 2 steps forward and sat down directly on top of his left foot. Wraith did not move. He had walked into the ruins expecting silence. He had found 3 living things sitting in the dark in a nest that had been cleaned out and left behind on purpose. He understood dracery abandonment law. Every soldier in this theater had been briefed on it. If a hatchling was too small, too damaged, too different from the clutch standard, the clutch moved on. No ceremony. No exception. It was survival math, and the dracery had been doing it for 10,000 years. Understanding a thing and standing in front of it were different experiences. The smallest one was still sitting on his boot. The largest one tilted its head slightly and opened its mouth. What came out was galactic standard, broken, accented, the kind learned from intercepted signals rather than any classroom. The words were small and careful, like the hatchling had been holding them for a long time and was not sure they would survive being spoken out loud. Are we bad dragons? Wraith's next breath did not come on schedule. He stood in the dark and ash of a cold nest on a contested frontier planet and looked at a hatchling the size of a large dog, asking him a question that had no military answer, no protocol answer, no answer that fit inside any field manual he had ever read. The pale one's wings shifted slightly. The small one on his boot tilted its gold eyes upward. The biggest one waited. It had the expression of something that had already considered the possibility that the answer was yes. That had been sitting in the dark rehearsing the answer yes for long enough that it had started to feel like the only reasonable outcome. And it was asking anyway, because even a creature that has accepted the worst answer still wants to hear something different one time, from someone standing in front of it, looking it in the eye. Wraith did not answer. Not yet. He had nothing ready. He was tired and ash-covered, and his squad was gone, and the ceasefire was 14 hours old, and none of that mattered at all right now. He unslung his pack from his shoulder. He lowered himself to one knee on the cold ground, which put him closer to eye level with the biggest hatchling. His knee hit the ash, and he did not think about his uniform. He just knelt there. The smallest one, still sitting on his boot, put one small clawed hand on his knee and looked up at him. The biggest one did not repeat the question. It simply watched him kneel, and something in its expression shifted, not trust. Not yet, too early for trust, but the first edge of something that might eventually become trust if a person was very careful and very patient. Wraith stayed where he was. Outside, the wind moved through the ruins of Draveth 9 and pushed ash across empty ground. The ceasefire held. Somewhere far behind him, command was waiting for his sweep report. He did not reach for his comm. Not yet. The comm crackled. Sergeant Oren's voice came through flat and tired, the way it always did when she was about to say something she did not want to say. Holland status. Wraith was still kneeling. The smallest hatchling, Breck, he would learn the name in an hour, had moved from his boot to his knee. It weighed almost nothing. The biggest one, Skiv, had not moved from its spot 2 feet away. The pale one with the bad wing sat behind Skiv and had not said a single word. Found 3 hatchlings in the nesting structure, Wraith said. Abandoned, alive, all 3. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of bad connection. The silence of a commanding officer calculating how much trouble a single sentence had just created. How old? Oren said. Young, juvenile, not combatants. Wraith. Sergeant. Another silence, longer this time. He could hear her breathing. You know what the protocol is, she said. He did know. He could recite it. Enemy-affiliated biological entities encountered post-ceasefire in contested zones fell under non-engagement rules unless they posed a direct threat. These 3 posed no threat. The protocol said, log the find, tag the location for diplomatic review, continue the sweep. The protocol did not say stay. The protocol did not say kneel in the ash and let a small dragon sit on your knee. I know the protocol, Wraith said. Then log it and keep moving. He looked at Skiv. Skiv was looking back at him with that same quiet, measuring expression. The gold-eyed one, Breck, made a small sound that was almost a question. I'll finish the sweep, Wraith said. Give me time. He cut the comm before Oren could answer. He did not finish the sweep, not then. He opened his pack and went through his rations. He had 4 days of field food, dense, dry, calorie-heavy. He had no idea what young Drackery ate, but he was fairly certain it was not compressed grain blocks and protein paste. He laid some out on a flat piece of wall panel. Skiv approached slowly, sniffed once, and looked up at him with an expression that communicated very clearly that this was an insult. I don't have anything better, Wraith said. Skiv considered this, then ate the protein paste with the expression of someone accepting a punishment they had earned. Breck ate everything immediately and looked around for more. The pale one, Nev, Skiv told him quietly, did not eat. Wraith got out his med kit. The wing was the problem. Up close he could see it had not broken recently. It had been wrong from the start, the joint angled slightly off in a way that would never fully correct. He could not fix it, but he could wrap it better. He asked Skiv if he could touch it. Skiv translated something to Nev in Drackery. Nev was still for a moment, then gave a small nod. Wraith wrapped the wing carefully with medwrap from his kit, supporting the joint, reducing the drag. It was not a fix. It was just slightly better than before. When he finished, Nev looked at the wrapped wing for a long time and said nothing. What is your name? Skiv said. Not quite a question, more like a test of whether he would answer. Wraith. Skiv tried the sound. Wraith, then you are a soldier. Yes. You fight Drackery. I did. Ceasefire now. Skiv was quiet. He looked at the ruins around them, at the empty nest, at the ash on the ground. The big ones left before the ceasefire, he said. They did not wait. I know. They left because we are. Skiv stopped, started again. Nev cannot fly, I am too small. Breck is. He looked at Breck, who was attempting to climb Wraith's pack. Breck is Breck. Wraith watched Breck tip sideways off the pack and land upside down, and not seem bothered at all. The clutch loss as a hatchling that cannot contribute is a weight, Skiv continued. His voice was flat and careful, like someone reciting a fact they had memorized to keep from feeling it. Our clutch mother followed the law. She is not wrong for following it. She's not right either, Wraith said. Skiv looked at him. Something moved behind his eyes, not argument, not agreement. Just the look of someone hearing a thing they had not heard before and not yet knowing what to do with it. Wraith pulled his thermal liner from his pack and laid it on the ground between them. It was not designed for hatchlings. It was wide enough. He gestured at the space. Sleep, he said. We move in the morning. Skiv did not ask where they were moving. He looked at Wraith for a moment, then moved onto the liner. Nev followed. Breck was already asleep against Wraith's side before anyone else had settled. Wraith sat with his back against the broken wall of the nest. The comm buzzed once. He silenced it. Outside, Draveth 9 was dark and cold and mostly quiet. Inside the hollow, 3 hatchlings breathed in the dark. He stayed awake until they were all sleeping. Then he let himself rest. Nobody had trained Wraith for this. 7 years of war had given him skills: breach and clear, night movement, field medicine, reading terrain, staying alive in places that did not want him alive. None of those skills covered moving 3 juvenile Dracari through contested ruins toward a neutral extraction zone without triggering a diplomatic incident or getting all 4 of them killed. He was learning fast. Breck, stop. Breck stopped chewing on the corner of a fallen wall panel and looked at him with large gold eyes that held no guilt whatsoever. We don't eat the building. Breck considered this position and seemed to disagree with it philosophically, but followed anyway. The route Wraith had mapped was 4 kilometers through the outer ruins of the old settlement, then 2 more across open ground to the neutral zone. On a normal day he could cover it in under an hour. With Skiv and Nev keeping pace quietly and without complaint, he estimated 3 hours. With Breck, he had stopped estimating. Skiv moved well. That was something Wraith had not expected. The hatchling was small and young, but he moved with intention, staying low when Wraith stayed low, stopping when Wraith stopped, watching the same directions Wraith watched without being told to. At one point, Wraith held up a fist and froze. Skiv froze immediately and put a hand on Breck's back without looking, a gesture so practiced it looked like instinct. Breck froze too. Wraith scanned the crumbled building ahead. Nothing. False alarm. He lowered his fist and they moved again. You have done this before, Wraith said quietly, not really a question. In the nest, Skiv said. When patrols came near, I kept them still. Wraith did not say anything for a moment. He thought about a juvenile dragon keeping 2 smaller, weaker hatchlings hidden and silent in a dark hollow, while military patrols moved overhead. He thought about how long they had been alone in that nest before he found them. He said, "You're good at it." Skiv said nothing, but his stride changed slightly, almost imperceptibly. Wraith recognized the change. He had seen it in soldiers who had been working alone too long, and finally had someone notice they were carrying something heavy. Nev walked on Wraith's left side. He did not talk much. He looked at everything: the ruins, the sky, the specific angle of broken walls, the patterns of old scorch marks on the ground. Once he stopped, crouched, and looked at something in the ash for a long time. Wraith crouched beside him. It was a piece of broken machinery, some kind of sensor unit, half buried. Human-made, Nev said quietly. Yes. Your forces put sensors throughout this zone, before the ceasefire. 43 of them based on the spacing pattern. He paused. I have counted 12 since we started walking. The others should be here, here, and here. He pointed without gesturing dramatically, just precise small movements. Wraith stared at him. You can read the pattern from the fragments. Yes. How? Nev blinked slowly. Math. Wraith adjusted their route to avoid 2 of the positions Nev had identified. He had no idea if the sensors were still active, but he had stopped being surprised by what Nev noticed. He started letting the hatchling walk slightly ahead and watching where he looked. The trouble came in the 3rd kilometer, which was where trouble always came. A Drackery patrol moved into the far end of the street ahead, 3 soldiers, full armor, moving in search pattern, not looking for hatchlings, probably checking for leftover human equipment or forward positions, but they were between Wraith and the next cover point. Wraith pulled all 3 off the road and into a collapsed cargo bay, a low dark space that smelled of burnt fuel and old metal. He pressed them into the far corner. Breck made a sound, small but real. Skiv was already moving. He put both hands around Breck's jaw, gently but firm, and looked directly into the gold eyes. He did not speak, he just held the look. Breck went silent, still, eyes wide but trusting. The patrol passed outside. Footsteps on the broken ground, the heavy sound of Drackery military boots, the low tones of soldiers talking about nothing important. 20 seconds, 30, then they were past. Wraith let out a slow breath. He looked at Skiv. Skiv was still holding Breck steady, only now letting go, smoothing down the scruff of the smaller one's neck with one careful hand. This was not something a hatchling learned in a few days. This was weeks of practice, weeks of keeping 2 others quiet and safe in a place that had been abandoned and dangerous and dark. Wraith thought about the question again. Are we bad dragons? He thought about the answer he had not given yet, and what it was going to mean when he finally said it. They reached the edge of the ruins just before the light shifted toward evening. The neutral zone was ahead, flat open ground, distant marker beacons, the faint signal of an emergency shelter unit. 2 more kilometers, Wraith said. Breck sat down in the road and looked at his feet. I know, Wraith said, come on. Breck got up and followed. They walked into the open, as the sky over Draveth 9 turned the color of old fire. The emergency shelter was a human design, a compact folding unit that expanded into a 4-meter square with insulated walls and a heat source. It had been left behind during a forward base withdrawal 6 months ago. Wraith had noted its position on his sector map. He had figured it might be useful someday. He had not figured on this exact situation. Inside, with the heat running and 3 hatchlings finally warm for the first time since he had found them, something shifted. The movement was over. The danger was paused. The space was quiet and enclosed, and it had the strange effect of making everyone inside it breathe differently. Breck fell asleep in 20 minutes in the corner near the heat source, curled tight, tail wrapped around himself, making a sound that was structurally identical to a purr. Nev sat cross-legged, which was not a natural Drackery position. He had learned it from watching Wraith and began drawing on the condensation of the shelter wall with one claw. Not random marks, maps, star positions, the Drackery route patterns he had memorized during the war. You can stop doing that, Wraith said gently. The war is paused. Nev looked at the maps he had drawn. I do not know what to do if I am not tracking, he said. Wraith understood that feeling in a very direct way. You could just sit. That seems inefficient. It is, it helps anyway. Nev considered this, and did not erase the maps, but did stop adding to them. Skiv sat across from Wraith and watched him with that direct, measuring look. Wraith had started to think of it as the command look, the expression of someone who has been in charge of a situation too long, and is not yet sure it is safe to stop. Ask, Wraith said. Skiv tilted his head. How did humans win so many battles against Drackery? Wraith raised an eyebrow. That was not the question he expected. We didn't win more, we just refused to lose. That is the same thing. It really isn't. Skiv considered. Explain. Wraith leaned back against the shelter wall. He was tired in a way that went past the body. But the question was real and Skiv was watching him with full attention, so he tried. Drackery fight to win, he said. If a position is lost, they fall back and reassess. It's smart, efficient. He paused. Humans fight for the thing behind the position. Sometimes that thing is people, sometimes it's a memory, sometimes it's something that doesn't even make tactical sense. We'll hold a hill that costs us twice what the hill is worth because we decided that hill means something. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's not always a good quality, but it's ours. Nev had stopped drawing. Both of them were listening now. In Dracari law, Skiv said slowly, a thing that costs more than it gives is abandoned. Yes. We cost more than we give. To the clutch. Wraith looked at him steadily. That's what the law says. You do not believe the law. I believe humans built a different kind of math, Wraith said. We kept our weak, our sick, our different. Every generation we kept them, fed them, carried them when they couldn't walk. He looked at Nev's wing. And some of them turned out to be the ones who changed everything, because they had time to think instead of just survive. Nev had gone very still. Not always, Wraith continued. Sometimes you just carry someone because they're yours and that's the end of the reason. You don't need the math to work out. Skiv was quiet for a long time. The shelter hummed. Breck made the purring sound in his sleep and twitched one foot. Among Dracari, Skiv said at last, the weak are a reminder that the clutch failed. A shame. Among humans, Wraith said, the weak are a reminder that none of us got here alone. Nev put down his claw. He looked at his wrapped wing. He turned it slowly, studying the medrap the way he studied everything, carefully, completely, extracting all the information available. Then he looked at Wraith. That is a very inefficient way to build a civilization, he said. Yes, Wraith said. You have survived anyway. Barely, repeatedly. Nev was quiet for a moment. I have calculated 11 ways our clutch mother's decision was logical under Dracari survival parameters. He paused. I have also calculated that if we had been born human, none of those calculations would have been made. Correct, Wraith said. Skiv looked at Nev, then back at Wraith. He sat up slightly straighter, the way someone sits when they have made a decision. We want to be that kind of species, he said, the kind that keeps. Wraith did not have an answer for that right away. He sat with it. Breck, asleep in the corner, made the purring sound again, louder. You already are, Wraith said finally. You kept each other. Skiv looked at Nev. Nev looked at the shelter wall. Neither of them said anything. But something in the room changed, like a door that had been slightly open, finally opened all the way. Outside, Draveth 9 was dark and cold and going nowhere. Inside, for a little while, it was warm. They heard the Dracari before they saw them. The particular sound of Dracari military boots on open ground was something a soldier learned early in this war, a rhythm slightly heavier than human steps, slightly more deliberate, 4 beats where a human left 2. Wraith had the shelter open and his hand on the hatchlings before the sound finished registering. Stay behind me, he said, all 3. Skiv moved immediately. He pulled Breck back by the shoulder and looked at Nev, who nodded and stepped back without needing to be told twice. Wraith came out of the shelter and stood in the open ground in front of it. Warspeaker Azrath was a large Dracari by any standard. Full chest armor, command markings on the neck plates, escort of 4 soldiers in a loose half-circle behind him. He stopped 10 meters from Wraith and looked at him with the careful, unreadable expression of someone who had not yet decided how angry to be. Corporal, Azrath said. His galactic standard was precise and clean, the kind learned from formal education rather than intercepted signals. You have something that was left in our territory. 3 hatchlings in an abandoned nest, Wraith said. Yes. Left behind under Dracari compact law. Abandoned property of no clutch. If they're no clutch's property, Wraith said, then they're not yours to reclaim. Azrath's neck plates flattened slightly. It was a small movement. In Dracari body language, it meant the same thing a slow exhale meant in humans, the deliberate act of choosing patience. You are a soldier, Azrath said, not a diplomat. You have no authority over Dracari biological matters. I have no authority at all, Wraith agreed. I'm a corporal. I found 3 living creatures in a cold nest and I didn't walk away from them. That's the whole story. The law is clear. I'm sure it is. Azrath took one step forward. You understand what you are doing. You are holding enemy-affiliated juveniles during a ceasefire. This is a political act, Corporal. It has implications for the treaty process. It has implications for both our peoples. Wraith looked at him. War Speaker, I've been in this war for 7 years. I've seen what both our peoples do to each other when we fight. I know what the implications look like. I know what a treaty looks like. He kept his voice level. I know what 3 hatchlings in the dark asking if they're bad look like too. I've seen all of it. And right now I'm standing in front of the last one. Silence stretched between them. Azrath's escort had not moved. Wraith had not moved. Behind Wraith, inside the shelter, he could hear Breck's breathing quick, a little frightened, and the absolute silence of Skiv choosing to hold still. The hatchlings were deemed non-viable, Azrath said. His voice had changed slightly. Not softer, more careful. The decision was made by the Clutch Mother according to survival doctrine. It is not a question of. War Speaker, Wraith said quietly, they can hear you. Azrath stopped. Wraith did not move aside. He did not gesture. He simply stood where he was and let the sentence sit in the air between them. Azrath looked past Wraith at the shelter entrance, at the 3 hatchlings standing just inside it. Breck had his gold eyes wide open and was watching Azrath with the expression of a creature that did not fully understand what was happening, but understood that it was important. Nev's gaze was steady and still, cataloging. Skiv stood in front of the other 2, hands loose at his sides, watching the War Speaker with the direct calm expression of something that had already been abandoned once, and was deciding how it felt about the possibility of a second time. Azrath held the look for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. It was not remorse. Dracari command officers did not wear remorse on their faces. It was something more complicated. The look of a person who has applied a law correctly and is standing in front of what the law produced, and finding that the 2 things do not fit together the way they should. He looked at Wraith. Wraith did not speak. Azrath turned. He said something to his escort in Dracari, short and flat. The escort reformed. He walked 4 steps back the way he had come. Then he stopped. Without turning around, he said, the hatchlings were not logged in the withdrawal records. There is no official record of their existence. He paused. There is therefore nothing to reclaim. He walked away. His escort followed. The sound of Dracari boots faded into the distance and then disappeared entirely. Wraith stood in the open ground for a moment after they were gone. He let out a breath that had been waiting since he first heard those footsteps. Behind him, Breck made a small, uncertain sound. Wraith turned around and went back inside the shelter and sat down on the ground, and Breck immediately climbed into his lap with the complete confidence of a creature that had decided this was its place. Skiv sat next to him. Nev sat next to Skiv. None of them said anything for a while. Then Skiv said very quietly, he let us go. Yes, Wraith said. Skiv thought about this, because you did not move. Because you were standing there, Wraith said. I just made sure he saw you. Skiv was quiet again. Outside, the wind moved across Draveth 9. Is that what humans do? He asked. Sometimes, Wraith said. Sometimes that's enough. The transport arrived at first light. It was not a military shuttle. Sergeant Oren had sent a civilian medical evacuation unit, the kind used to move wounded personnel out of contested zones with minimum documentation. Wraith recognized the choice immediately. Civilian med units had looser passenger manifests. What arrived was recorded. What left was sometimes just listed as cargo. Oren was standing at the ramp. She looked at Wraith. She looked at the three hatchlings behind him. She looked at Breck, who was wearing Wraith's spare thermal liner like a cloak because Wraith had put it on him the night before when the temperature dropped and had not been able to bring himself to take it back. Orin said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm going to need more paperwork than I've ever filed in my life." "Probably," Wraith said. "Command is going to have opinions." "Definitely." She looked at Skiv. Skiv looked back at her with the direct, measuring expression he used on everything new and unknown. "He looks at people like a sergeant," Orin said. "He's been running a two-hatchling operation in a combat zone for weeks," Wraith said. "He's earned it." Orin rubbed her face. Then she stepped aside from the ramp. "Get them on board. I'll file the paperwork as a forward contact diplomatic event. It's not a lie, not entirely." They boarded. The transport was small and functional, 4 seats along each wall, storage in the center, a small observation port on the left side. It smelled like industrial cleaner and recycled air. Breck found this fascinating and spent 5 minutes pressing his nose to every surface in the cabin with great scientific interest. Nev sat by the observation port. As the transport lifted, he pressed his hand flat against the glass and watched Draveth 9 fall away below them. The settlement ruins, the open ground of the neutral zone, the nest structures in the far distance, gray and cold. He watched until the planet's surface was just color, then just a curve of horizon, then just a shape in the dark. He did not say anything, but he watched for a very long time. Breck fell asleep before they cleared the upper atmosphere, which Orin said was either a sign of great trust or no survival instinct, and Wraith said those two things were sometimes the same. Orin looked at Breck drooling slightly against the storage unit and seemed to be recalculating something about her life. Skiv sat beside Wraith. Not close, not touching, just beside, the way soldiers sit when they are done moving and can finally be still. He looked out the port on his side at the dark between the stars, and for the first time since Wraith had found him, he did not look like he was holding a position. He looked like someone who had been holding something tightly for a very long time and had just, carefully, opened his hands. For a while neither of them said anything. The transport moved. The stars outside stayed still in the way stars always look still even when everything was moving. Draveth 9 was behind them. What was ahead was unsettled and unknown and would require, as Orin had said, a significant amount of paperwork. Then Skiv turned from the port and looked at Wraith. His voice was different from the first time. The first time it had been small and careful, the voice of something that had already rehearsed the worst answer and was asking anyway. Now it was something else. Not certain, too much had happened too fast for certainty, but steady. The voice of someone asking a question they mostly know the answer to and want to hear said out loud one time clearly by someone who means it. "Are we bad dragons?" he said. Wraith looked at him. He looked at Nev, who was still watching the stars, whose wrapped wing was resting against the wall of the transport, whose mind had mapped 43 sensors from 12 fragments, and who was, right now, probably cataloging the exact distance between stellar bodies visible through the port. He looked at Breck, who was asleep with one hand flopped over his own face, completely at peace with the universe. He looked back at Skiv. "No," he said, "you're the 3 best I've ever met." Skiv held the answer, turned it over, checked it the way he checked everything, looking for the angle, looking for the cost. Wraith let him. The answer would hold. He had not said it to make the hatchling feel better. He had said it because it was true, and those two things happened to be the same. After a moment, Skiv nodded once. The small, firm nod of someone filing something in a permanent place. Then he said, with great seriousness, as if announcing a decision that had been carefully reached, "When we are bigger, we will protect you." Wraith looked at him. "All 3 of you," he said. "All 3, Skiv said. "Nev will find the threats before they arrive. Breck will," he paused, thoughtful. "Breck will do something." "That's fair," Wraith said. And I will stand in front, Skiv said simply, as you stood. Wraith was quiet for a moment. Outside, the dark between stars went on without end, indifferent to small things inside small transports crossing small distances in a very large universe. It did not care about 3 hatchlings or 1 soldier or the ceasefire or the war or the paperwork Orin was already composing with the expression of a person aging in real time. None of that mattered to the universe. It mattered here. I'm counting on it, Wraith said. Skiv settled back against the wall. The transport flew on,